Hey guys, DMS3TV here. Today, I have the Philips FIDELIO X2. A lot of people have asked me about these, and here they finally are. So, without any more hesitation, let's get right into it. Starting off is, of course, as always, the build quality. Now, these are built reasonably well. I'm actually very surprised with them. I wasn't a big fan of the SHP 9500s, but the X2s are built very nicely. Comfort is fine. I can wear them for a pretty long time. The pads are a little bit stiff, but I really don't mind it because they don't sweat much. At first, the clamp feels a little bit intense, but over time, you kind of get used to it. I mean, it's definitely easier than the HT600 clamp before they're worn in. Now, I would say after the HT600s are worn in, they are much more comfortable, but apples and oranges. Anyway, there is some metal in the construction. These cups right here are made of metal. These bars that go through the top of the headband are metal, and so are these grills. Aside from that, it seems that the actual piece that holds the headband to its strap right here is plastic, and of course the actual piece that connects the cable in around there is a little bit of plastic. But aside from that, everything else appears to be either metal or leather. I don't know if this is actually real leather. I think it is. I could be wrong. And these Velour Pads are pretty decent. Like I said, they're pretty stiff, but it's not really a bad thing. It's almost kind of like Velour Pads, only a little bit more thick, so it's not as much of a pressure point on the side of your head. Now, these are open back cans, so they are going to leak. And these leak a pretty hefty bit, which is surprising. These leak more than the SHP 9500s did. Which, I mean, open back cans, if you're buying open back, you really aren't concerned that much about leak to begin with, so I don't see that as a major issue. But comfort-wise, I do have one complaint, and that's that this headband, while it is a good design. I do like this. I like headbands that do this to an extent. For some reason, AKG does this also. They put pressure in just the wrong spot on the center of my head right here. It doesn't seem to distribute it as evenly. That could just be my head shape also, so your mileage may vary on that. But that's one little thing I had just a little bit of an issue with. It wasn't a deal breaker. I still wore these for quite a while gaming just to test out how they'd be for gaming. I actually live streamed that, and that was pretty fun. But overall build, I'm pretty satisfied with them. The cable is also pretty well built. It's a 3.5 mil stereo cable on both ends, and it is long. I mean, I don't know exactly how long this is, but let's fold it in half twice. There we go. That's folded in half twice. Quite a lot of cable we got there. And it has a little clip that you can use, so when you wrap it all up nice and neat, you can clip it back into itself right there, just like that. It's not going to go anywhere. So that's useful. Overall, this cable's pretty nice. I don't really have any complaints about it. Like I said, it's 3.5 on both ends, so you'll have to use an adapter to terminate it to quarter, and there isn't an option for a screw-on. But being a 3.5, you could really use any 3.5mm stereo cable with this, so not a big deal unless you wanted these to be balanced. And speaking of sound, how do they sound? If you like these, you're not going to like what I have to say about them. There is a very strong bump in the bass in these. They are almost what I would call V-shaped, but not quite, because it kind of... I'll explain in just a moment. There is a big bump in the bass, but it's in mid-bass. You don't get much sub-bass in these. There's a big bump between around 60 to 100 hertz, and then it rolls off pretty sharply. So you get a lot of mid-bass response, and it's almost overwhelming at times. Now, that in itself, could be, you like really bassy headphones. That's fine. The problem being that the distortion in the low end is not really what I would describe as acceptable. If you look these up, there's actually a lot of total harmonic distortion in the bass. And when you crank these up, I don't mean crank them up as in like blast them. I mean turn them up just barely into what I would call from a listening level to like a, hey, I'm going to kind of jam out for a minute level. You hear that distortion push its way through the entire mix. And what that means is that when you're hearing that bass on every impact, you hear it through the mids, you hear it through the highs, you hear it through everything. Everything distorts, which for me is kind of unacceptable. So you can really only listen to these at low to medium low levels, which I find kind of disappointing. But unfortunately, it doesn't end there. There is almost no vocal presence, as there is a very sharp drop off in these around 3K. But it's not just a drop off. It doesn't just roll off there. It's not like a dark headphone. They pick right back up, and there's really, really sharp peaks at 5 and 9K, which is why some people would describe these as V-shaped, because they have those sharp peaks in the highs, and they have that big bump in the lows. But the problem is that they're missing so many things in between, and when you listen to them, you can really tell. And I tried to EQ some of it back in, and I tried to EQ some of the peaks out, and I really couldn't find a happy balance without getting a lot of distortion in these, which I found really disappointing. Now, that being said, if you can find these, for a lower price, that's absolutely fine. I've seen some of these on eBay for $80, and I think that that's a very fair price for the kind of sound you're getting, and especially for the build. If you can find these for $100 or less, I think that's a decent deal. But I don't consider them high fidelity, because there is no way that this is high fidelity to the original recording. Nothing about this is what I would consider hi-fi. This is very much marketed towards a consumer audience that's into really sharp sibilant highs and booming bass without much sub, which is disappointing because I actually expected a lot more from these considering their popularity. And they didn't seem to fix the grain. Last time I mentioned grain in Philips headphones, I got a lot of crap for it, but I have to be honest with it. They're just disappointing. So, that being said, there are ways you can enjoy these. They're not bad for gaming. The soundstage isn't necessarily phenomenal, but it isn't bad. You could certainly use these for, gaming online and stuff like that. If you find them for a decent price, especially under $100, this could make a good gaming headset because they have that added bass and that added little bit of sharpness in the highs. That could be decent for gaming. I mean, especially if you're, going for like something, say, a little bit more cinematic. But I don't really see these as a good hi-fi. Now, that is also opinion. Take what you will. You may like those features and you may like that sound signature. That's all up to you. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. I have a whole lot of really interesting cans on the way, including the AKG K7XXs, the Fostex THX00 Purple Hearts, a lot of really cool cans. The 6XX, the 650 versus the 600 versus the 580, like crazy comparison that I don't think anybody's done yet for Sennheiser. A lot of other interesting things. So if you want to support the channel, I'm going to leave a link in the description to Patreon. I really appreciate the people who help support me on there. And honestly, if you can contribute, I really do appreciate it because the channel actually really needs it right now. Aside from that, as always, I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.